Welcome to Saltivation. The Saltivation Show is a podcast series featuring the leading voices in salt, where we talk about the issues and strategies to help you make sense of state and local tax.
You know, the other thing, Judy, that's important for psilocybin startups and cannabis industry people to understand is that, let me say this first, the psilocybin industry doesn't want to be compared to the marijuana industry, and you could probably understand why on that. The problem, though, is that the federal government is going to see them the same. And so the roadmap that we have, the experience that we have is from the cannabis industry, right?
Interesting.
So
okay.
In order to think about how the laws might apply to the psilocybin industry, there's no way getting around the cannabis example. And one thing that happened in the cannabis example is that when marijuana was fully legalized for adult use, taxes came into place as well. Psilocybin, I don't think that's really happening yet. But along with those new taxes came regular audits. And so I've been saying for a long time, every cannabis company gets audited, period. End of story. And they get audited by the federal government. And in each state, many states have pledged to audit cannabis companies every 3 years, clockwork. And the new audit 3 years later starts with the day after the end of the prior audit. And they just happen every 3 years,
Wow.
just like clockwork. And you know, that means that the things that many small businesses get away with, the innocent little mistakes and all of those just little things, those are all going to get caught and they're going to add up.
Yeah. Which is funny because you would see that, like we deal with so many small startup businesses and large startup businesses, been around 10 years that are wildly successful, didn't have anything around this and haven't had any punitive ramifications of miscompliance because they just have a culture of like, you know, high tech is a perfect example of like, we're breaking it, we're disrupting. And then, tax, you know, they don't think about it till they get caught 10 years later. Yeah. It's a very interesting world we live in. And yet the culture around cannabis and soon to be psilocybin, I can assume will be more regulatory compliance mindset out of the gate because they have so many things to serve to get their acts together to be in the business. So you kind of go in with the mindset of over paperworking yourself. Very interesting.
And you know, Meredith, if I might just say one thing, you know, that when the cannabis industry got started, people didn't understand 280E, and they a lot of them. And then when 280E kind of showed up, they sort of said that can't be right. And here's the reality of 280E in a very, very simple little example. 280E applies to deductions, but not cost of goods sold. And so let's put it in the context of psilocybin. If I buy a mushroom to sell and I pay $2 for that mushroom, and then I pay my salesperson a $2 salary, and they sell it for $5, right? I just made $1, but because of 280E, I am not going to get to be able to deduct the $2 I pay to my salesperson. So I'm going to pay tax on $3. That is going to be my income for tax purposes. And so that creates a number of big problems. Number one, if you're an owner in an LLC and you receive a K1, you're in a flow-through company, that's your personal problem. You just got $1, but you have taxable income of $3. And it could well be that you didn't even get that dollar.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be, that's a huge burden, right? And those numbers can be much, 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 much bigger. A bunch of the cannabis industry woke up to the reality of 280E because they went through audits. They realized through that audit that they weren't even profitable. Once 280E applied, they weren't making any money. But guess what? They had multi-million-dollar personal tax liabilities. All in the same moment. That's the realization, right? That is not what the psilocybin industry wants to happen to them, right? It is brutal. A lot of those people are still carrying those huge liabilities. The IRS won't forgive them, even though they never had the money, right? It's horrible. It is a tragedy, actually, for the industry right now.
Right, because it's almost like they're getting taken out when they have a legitimate thing.
You know, because of the way our system works, state tax returns start at, you know, line 35 or whatever it is of the federal tax return.
28 or 30.
And so if you're in a company that's subject to 280E, you're going to pay that tax again at the state level because it takes off from
Your federal.
Your federal AGI,
right?
adjusted gross income. Yeah.
And so many states have decoupled from the federal regime and allowed what I call an add back, where you put those disallowed costs back in on your state tax return. But I don't see that happening in the psilocybin industry right now. And if I'm a person who is involved in that industry and is trying to advocate for my business, that's a really, really, really important thing to get, is that add back to decouple from the federal 280E penalty.
Do you think that's why the psilocybin industry doesn't want to be associated with the marijuana, or kind of piggyback off of that because they don't want to be roped into 280E? Or do you think, what other reason, because you had said that they kind of want to differentiate themselves, what other reason, or why do you think that's the case?
I think it's a number of things. I think that's certainly one of them. I think also, the marijuana industry is much more of a party industry kind of platform. I don't know. It's sort of
there's medical, maybe more like stereotypes or like biases associated with marijuana.
It sort of started out medical, that kind of medical,
Yeah.
and then and now we're finding out, I think, that it really is. There really are legitimate medical uses and all this kind of stuff, whereas the psilocybin industry is really starting out medical, in a lot of ways, and I think that is significant for the psilocybin industry. And the cannabis industry's on hard times right now, right? Either if you look at the 10 biggest cannabis companies out there, they're carrying close to $1 billion in tax debt because of 280E, and so if I'm a psilocybin company, I want to run away from that as fast as I can, right? And try to distinguish myself differently. And many of the state regulators are frustrated with the cannabis industry because the regulations and the industry aren't always on the same page. Right now, Judy, there's this really fun thing going on in the state of Colorado that I call the bud trim wars. It's sort of apocalyptic, I hope. And bud is the kind of cannabis that you want to buy, flower, bud, whatever that is. And trim is the kind of cannabis that then goes to make oil and edibles and
kind
all
of the
that
extractive component that you use to make something else that you're not smoking.
Yeah.
Right. And they have different tax rates that apply to them. Bud rate's higher than the trim rate. But the state thinks that the bud is like, and the trim are these two very distinct, totally separate things that, never the two are entwined. And the truth is that's not the case. That actually there are leaves that come out of the buds, right? And there is this thing called keef, that's the good stuff, that falls on the leaves. And there's just it's not as clean as that. But the state wants to say that if you have any bud in your trim at all, it's all bud.
Oh, there's no way. So no way you could separate that.
So now
it's like oil and water.
It
doesn't separate like that.
All of your trim as bud and try to assess that tax. Guess what? That's millions.
That's just bad policy.
It's brutal. And the industry's like, look, man, this is the way everyone's doing it. No one will buy that right there, that trim. No one will pay bud for price for that. We can't sell that as bud.
Yeah.
And that's the reality that the industry faces, and the Department of Revenue isn't just on the same page with that.
And you've already collected the tax. It's done. You've already had that customer buy the good. You can't go back to the past and redo it. Ooh, right. That's brutal. Yeah. That's going to wipe the industry out.
Has to work through, it's one of many things like that, Judy, and every state has to work through those processes, and it gets frustrating after a while.
Oh, it's ridiculous. Yes.
On both sides, right? So back to why the psilocybin industry doesn't want to inherit those problems, right?
Okay.
It's exciting, though. I think we're going to make real progress for a lot of people that need help. I think it's going to become both of these are going to become in lots of different ways, mainstream medicine that we'll see. It's really a promising time, I think, for people who don't want to take, opioids and things of that sort, and want an alternative source of comfort for them. And we're going to get there, but it's
Like, how fast do you think? Are we 5, 10 years out? I mean, this could really happen in a day if people really wanted to do it, but it's not
Yeah.
happening. It just keeps getting, I know it's really complicated stuff to sort through, but in the end, do you want the business to thrive or not? I really struggle with the 280 fundamentally. I just think it's a legitimate legal business. We should just allow it. That should just be a carve out, but whatever. That nobody asked me.
I hear you. I hear
But
you.
I just don't think it's fair
know.
to treat a legitimate business like it's not a legitimate business. It's kind of what you're saying indirectly by disallowing expenses and otherwise. So, and then regulating and retransferring things that are muddled. That's craziness. Yeah.
They're a huge taxpayer in our state, right? Bigger than a lot of the other big taxpayers.
Well, I think the car industry historically was the most sales tax revenue in the state, and I think construction's up there too. But I think you're right. Marijuana has turned out to be a very good revenue raiser, and you need to rethink this government, right?
Right.
Yeah, and people want it. The voters have spoken. So,
and they're good community partners for the most part too. You know, they come into urban decay neighborhoods, and they have to spend a bunch of money to update a facility that's falling down, and then they have to spend a bunch of money to make sure that facility looks good and is compliant with all the regulations and is secure and everything else. And if we did this right, we'd take those drug sales off of the streets and put them into these secure places where they could be controlled and tested. If you buy marijuana in dispensary, you know it's clean. If you buy it on the street, you have no idea whether it's clean or not.
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of good reasons that why to take that day and make this work, Judy. But there's a lot of politics still preventing it from happening.
Yeah.
Well, and I think there's a lot of stigma associated too, right? Like my in-laws, who my father-in-law suffers a lot with like chronic pain and is, but the first source is a pill. So you've got Vicodins and Percocets and all of that nonsense in his cabinet. But my mother-in-law is still of the impression that, marijuana is a gateway drug to, I don't know, all of a sudden you're going to smoke weed once and all of a sudden you're addicted to heroin. Pretty sure if we're talking about like, the opioid crisis that exists in Ohio, which kind of gets pinpointed a lot, like I think there's still a lot of like stigma and education that needs to be disassociated from it. And the unfortunate thing is, I think, maybe more of the progressive states, Oregon, Colorado, are on the earlier adopter sides of more natural treatments, also kind of stigmatized of like, well, they're just like the stoner hippie states, so that like they just want to do it so they can get high legally. And so it's just like there's still this push-pull, of
which is so not true. Lettuce, right? The lettuce. It's lettuce. It's not, it's bad lettuce. Kentucky, I think. So I've heard that term from somebody. But, my dad died of cancer and he suffered greatly for almost a year. And I know he took medical marijuana to ease his stress. I can't even imagine living with a terminal illness and going to sleep at night. It's one thing when you're busy and everyone's telling you how much they love you and we're sad you're, not doing well. It's another thing when you're alone with your own thoughts. I mean, the stress of going through a very difficult illness. I mean, what a blessing to have something that might help you, have less inflammation, all the things that we're suffering from as a society for a naturally occurring substance that's palliative. I think it's really fascinating. And, I have to say, I went to a conference years ago in Vegas because I was trying to decide, how many of these cannabis clients do I want to work with? And I was very impressed with the quality of the people there, with the content, with the ethos was just super not pot. It's not stoner. It was very, this is good. It makes me a better person. I want to help other people be better people. I want them to have less anxiety, just a lot of that. And I really, really thought it was a lot of really good people. And it wasn't the perception that people think of just getting stoned. I don't think that's the case at all. They're very legitimate businesses that are, providing meaningful balance to this world. So
they have to be.
Yeah.
And so as, we kind of wrap up, Nick, what are some things that, you're kind of paying attention to and wanting to kind of get out to the public for those kind of companies who want to enter this space or think about what would be your parting words to them? What would you leave them with?
Yeah, I think that first off, using good professionals like Judy
Like you.
and
yourself.
having real advice. Having real advice is really important. A lot of people got really hurt because that wasn't available in the cannabis space, and they really paid the price. So first off, get the right professionals, experienced professionals that have experience in the areas that you're talking about, not just there's a lot of different kinds of psilocybin, and I wish I knew all the different strains because I'd throw one out right now. But a real tax professional, right? And then you can't cut corners in these industries. You're going to get audited, and those corners are going to be seen, and you have to pay attention to it, and you have to spend those dollars. Professionals are not cheap, but the truth is that if you try to just wing it, you're probably going to fail. And it's probably going to come back and be a big personal problem for you too. And so, it takes bravery, but it also takes a little bit of, caution as well.
Well, I think that's really, helpful advice, even for any business owner, right? Outside of just, a
Sure.
stigmatized industry. So, Nick, we really
And
appreciate.
Meredith, let me say this.
Of course.
If the tax man calls you, don't talk to him. Okay? Don't talk to him. Judy, I don't know how many cases I've taken on where they already talked to the guys, and I'm like, guys, what are you doing?
Yeah.
No, you don't say those things. It's not even true.
No.
Why would you say that?
Yeah.
Don't talk to them.
Don't give them a
They're not your
tour.
friend.
No.
not
Not
there to
without
help you.
somebody
They're not there to help
being
you.
there to
Okay?
make sure the Santa words are. Yeah, no, because people oversell kind of their concepts, but that isn't really what they're doing sometimes. They don't really have the right ear of how to explain. They're more marketing, sales driven than they are actually what the government wants to know. Yeah.
Here's how it goes. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm represented by Judy, and here's her phone number. Please give her a call. Because if you don't say that, here's the next thing they're going to say. Oh, Mr. Taxpayer, can you tell me where you bank? Why do you think they want to know that? So they can take your money. That's why. And it's a lot easier for me to say, gosh, Mr. Tax Person, I just don't know where they bank.
Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Well, and to sanitize the data, I mean, I actually am just in a situation right now where I'm dealing with the city audit. It's been going on since September, and they're like at the deadline, and I got to twist in a pretzel to file a document, a protest with the city to stop the top clock. Otherwise, the audit assessment stands. We got no relief, right? We're just stuck. We got to go to court. It's going to be very expensive. Who knows? So I'm like, why do people do this? Like, you just thought you could do it, and then you didn't really know what you're doing, and then you thought it would be a better answer, and it wasn't. I wish I could do that at the outset, though, because a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to spend the money with you. And you can't show them at the outset the money you're going to save them because you don't have a number. You just know you didn't have the number that they might have had. It's hard to prove a negative, if that makes sense. So I'll struggle with that because I look at what I'm able to do once I have a number, but if I don't have a number and I begin, I don't always know by the end it's that I saved them anything. I try to say, well, we didn't deal with that, so we're good, right? That's a big thing off the record. Yeah, it's interesting you say that. But people are stressed. They don't know how to hire the right counsel. They don't know you, everybody. So hopefully more people will know you now and know that you're a resource for them as a legal expert in the field. And that's really important to, like you said, have that expertise out there in the universe.
And I think I speak for the tax professional community as a whole that, look, if you have a problem, we'll talk to you and not charge you and see if we can help you.
Yeah.
And if we can't help you, we'll let you know. And if we can, then it's going to be worth it. I think that's the truth of it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. And until next time, this is Saltivation. This podcast is for educational purposes only and is not intended, nor should it be relied upon as legal, tax, accounting, or investment advice. You should consult with a competent professional to discuss specifics of your situation and the applicability of the information presented.